Contestant number 0, would you like me to repeat the question? There were tallies carved into my flesh. I stopped counting when they surpassed 1 million. 1 million cuts. 1 million questions. 1 million times I tried to die. My clothes were filthy, shredded, and glued to my skin. I wanted to scream, but my mouth was restricted. I wanted to cry, but if I did, I would be punished. How long had it been since I ate, drank, bathed? Across from me, Ella was trembling behind her podium, lit by neon light, her eyes unseeing, lips curved into a silent cry. If I didn't open my mouth in the next 30 seconds, we were doomed. I risked a glance at Deju, who was trying not to fall asleep, half-lidded eyes flickering. It was really hard not to look at the giant cavern in his chest where his heart had been yanked out. Deju's punishment for not knowing who sang the song, Baby One More Time. Unfortunately, Ella also landed on the revival prize, contestant number 0. Straightening up, I smiled widely at the cameras, trying to ignore the iron chains wrapped around my ankles. The answer is Ryan Reynolds. Sting, that's 100 correct answers in a row. The host turned to the imaginary audience, and I had the sudden, overwhelming urge to break the monitor, playing fake applause. The large screen above us lit up with personalized prizes. I almost collapsed when I saw death. If I played my cards right, I could finally die. All of us could die. All right, to win all of these prizes, you must answer the golden question. She winked. However, this time, you have the ability to ask a friend. No. Deju's frenzied eyes found mine. Skip it. Shut up, Deju, Ella hissed. Can't you see what they're offering? It's clearly a trap. He slammed his buzzer, struggling in his own chains. I'm okay. I can answer it this time. I tried to smile at my fellow contestants, but they refused to look me in the eye. Deju glared down at his podium, shaggy dark hair obscuring his face. Ella pretended to inspect her fingernails, but she was shaking. Well, all right. The host giggled. Why don't we bring back Chloe? A body bag was dragged in. Inside were the remnants of Clue, contestant 6, who was force-fed battery acid for losing 600K. Clue's body was thrown in front of me. The dead boy's eyes flickered open, confused. Okay, contestant number 0, for $7 million and all prizes on screen, please answer the golden question. If you need help, I will allow you to pass the question to contestant number 6. Deju Face planted his buzzer. We're so fucked. The host's smile widened, stretching unnaturally across her face. Contestant number 0, alias Connor, what was the name of the child the 6 of you brutally murdered? Hilda was 7 years and 4 months old. This last detail was of importance to her, as it proved she was the older one in her group of friends. She liked the hierarchy advantage that came with it, and used it when she needed a reason for the others to listen to her. Hilda, look. That was Amik, Hilda's best friend. She was pointing her finger at Pim Johnserton on the other side of the park. Pim was about to run straight into one of the benches. Thanks to Amik, Hilda turned to look just in time to watch the whole scene unfold. That's what you get for running while looking the other way like that, Hilda managed to say amidst all the laughter. Who cares, said Amik as she kept laughing. It was common for Amik to make these sorts of remarks, but Hilda didn't mind. She actually agreed with her. She barely managed to keep it together when she saw Amik's finger pointing straight out at someone like that. If it hadn't been for Pim's whole stunt distracting her, the words, "Don't do that," would have come out of her mouth almost with a life of their own, and she hated that. Truth be told, Hilda's mom was very strict with some things. In general, everything at home was fine most of the time, but her mom would just be so annoying about particular habits. Hilda used to do as Amik and point with her finger a lot. She wasn't very good at communicating, so she would constantly point at things and people to get her point across, to be understood. Hilda's mom hated it when she did that. "We don't do that," she would say with words sharp as knives. She controlled herself when Hilda was younger, but as she grew, she showed her true disgust for this gesture more and more. Now, she grabbed Hilda's wrist before she could even raise her arm and gave her a look that could kill. "We don't." Do that, she would say, as if stabbing Hilda with each word. Still, Hilda didn't hate her mum for it. She is usually so nice and normal, you know, she would tell Amek sometimes. It's like some things just flip a switch on her. The part that made Hilda feel for her mother, though, was whenever she would say, "Don't ever let your grandfather see you do that, you hear me?" Hilda had it rough, but she knew by now that her mother probably had it worse. Her mother made it clear plenty of times that it would be much, much worse if it were her grandfather and not her mother who saw her pointing her finger like that. She could sometimes even feel some sort of pain in her mother's voice. "I think it was worse for her, being a kid with my grandpa as her father," she would tell Amek. "Why are your folks like this, though? It's just so weird. Why do they even care so much?" was what Amek had to say to that. Her family was very different from Hilda's. Hilda loved that Amek was like this. It made her feel like things were normal, at least when they were at school. How long had it been since she last dared to disobey her mum and just be free like Amek? When was the last time she just pointed her finger at someone when she felt like it, like she did when she was younger? She unconsciously grabbed her wrist at this thought. That Saturday morning, as she ate her cereal and laughed a little, remembering how Pim Johnston fell running into that bench, Hilda's mum walked in. "How's the cereal, love? Remember we have to be at Grandma and Grandpa's house by lunch. I want to buy a couple of things at a local boutique there, and it takes us an hour to get there by car. Don't take too long on that cereal or we won't make it on time. There's lots to do," she said without waiting for a response as she dashed away. In the car, Hilda couldn't stop thinking about Pim's fall, but that was just a lie she told herself every now and then to feel better. What she really couldn't stop thinking about was a mic. Her finger pointed freely, without a care in the world, in Pim's direction. How long had it been since she was free like that? Since she didn't care this much about her mum and what she had to say about it. "Let's go, hun. Grab something nice for yourself while I get what we need to bring over to Grandma and Grandpa's place, okay?" said Hilda's mum. They were at the boutique already. Hilda wandered through the aisles looking for something yummy. She found a couple of things she liked and walked back to where her mum was. She tossed the items into her mum's basket and stood next to her while she talked to someone she seemed to know. On the other side of the store, a man talked on the phone with his back turned to them. He was a bit loud and moved his free hand around while he talked. "I want to do it," Hilda thought. Just like that, while her mother was distracted, she quietly raised her arm and pointed at the man. For a brief moment, she felt bliss and a wave of liberation, but it didn't last long. As if he knew, the man turned his head and looked straight at Hilda. She knew something was wrong. The man didn't turn around, only his head did. Time seemed to stop. The man's eyes, abnormally open, looked straight into Hilda's eyes. She couldn't look away. The rest of the man's face was expressionless. Hilda started feeling the air around her turn cold. A chill ran through her spine. The man started slowly tilting his head sideways, and as he did so, his mouth began drooping down at the corners. Her heart was beating fast. She felt like, no matter how fast she breathed, enough air just wouldn't go into her lungs. When the corners of the man's mouth had gone far too down, Hilda was already sweating. His head was about to be completely horizontal. "Hilda!" Her mum scowled at her as she grabbed her wrist. How long had it been? What happened to the man? Hilda looked. He was talking on the phone with his back turned to them, just like before. What just happened? Did she imagine it all? Hilda quickly looked at her mum. The woman looked back at her daughter for a very brief moment, and without letting go of her wrist, she dropped the shopping basket and bolted out of the store. "Get in the car. We need your grandfather, now." It was the summer of 2014. My parents and I were heading to a remote area of the Olympic Peninsula for a summer getaway. We didn't often go on trips, as money was always tight in our family. This year, my parents wanted to do something special for my 13th birthday. I'd always wanted to go camping, and I loved the outdoors, especially the forest. There was something about forests that always fascinated me. Perhaps the mystical feeling that came with entering the thick greenery of the Pacific Northwest. I knew from a young age that trees carry memory. Most trees I saw were older than I was, and I always wondered what their stories were. The forest was my safe place. I never much cared for the concrete jungle. Much like my father, I was, and still am, very much an introvert, preferring nature over people or anything man. As we pulled up to our camping spot, my heart jumped with glee. I hopped out of our Dodge Caravan and raced into the woods. My mother called after me, "Make sure you stay close and get back before dark." I turned and nodded at her while my father began to unload the van. I skipped off through the trees, admiring the wooden giants and the sounds that echoed throughout the woods. Birds singing, cicadas humming, and the occasional twig snap from wildlife. Or so I thought. On my mini-adventure, I found a towering giant. Its trunk looked almost carved out to the perfect size for a child. My height, as if it had grown just for me. I trotted excitedly into the trunk, gazing up, mesmerized by the life inside. Spiders and beetles alike were all taking up residence in this ancient, natural structure. I thought they were beautiful and mesmerizing in every way. I must have spent a good half hour in that tree when silence engulfed the forest. How strange, I thought, as I knew the forest normally grew louder as the night approached. I peeked my head out from the stump, scanning the forest for any life. Silence. The forest went from gleaming with life to looking dull and benign. I stepped out hesitantly. Something wasn't right. Through the silence, a loud, piercing sound echoed through the woods. It was so unexpected I almost jumped out of my skin. It sounded like a chainsaw. I assumed someone must be trimming trees or something, so I didn't think much of it. Again, silence filled the forest, and the sun began to disappear. I remembered my mother's words and began making my way back to our campsite, imagining a pitched tent and a fire ready for marshmallows. Through the darkening forest, I could just barely make out the van and sprinted toward it in excitement. As I approached, I noticed the absence of anything related to camping. The only things unloaded from the van were a cooler and my father's fishing rod, which lay flat on the ground. That struck me as odd, as my father took great pride in his fishing rod. He never just left it on the ground, fearing it would be stepped on and snapped. I looked around the campsite, but my parents were nowhere in sight. "Mom? Dad?" I called, but there was no answer. Fear crawled up my spine as darkness filled the forest and an unbearable silence filled the air. I called for them again, louder, but still no answer. I didn't have a phone yet at that age, and normally I wouldn't have needed one. I glanced around and didn't see either of my parents' phones anywhere. We were miles from the nearest person, as the campsites were spaced very comfortably apart to ensure a secluded experience. I opened the van's sliding door and sat in the passenger seat. They must be out collecting wood for the fire, I thought. It was the only logical conclusion I could reach. So, I waited in the van, expecting them to return swiftly. Hours went by. My surroundings were black as ink. My mind started racing, wondering where they were and if something had happened. I scoured the vehicle for a flashlight and found one of our battery-operated lanterns. I switched it on and hesitantly left the safety of the van. There was a small path leading into the woods from our campsite. Thinking maybe they had followed the path and gotten lost, I began down it. There was still no sound other than my footsteps as I reluctantly made my way farther and farther from our campsite. I began calling them again, hoping maybe they'd follow the sound of my voice. It had to be close to midnight by now, but I had no way to tell the time. About 10 minutes down the path, that roaring sound rattled the trees again. The sound of a chainsaw. But closer this time. Who would be cutting trees at this hour? I stopped in my tracks and listened, and then a blood-curdling scream harmonized with the teeth-clenching, mechanized sound. "Mom," I yelled, sure that it was her voice. I'd never heard her scream before, but what other woman would have been this deep into the woods? Stupidly, I ran toward where I heard the heart-wrenching noises. The dark woods fell silent once again, with nothing but my frantic footsteps and shaky voice echoing around me. I realized, far too late, that I had strayed from the path. I stopped and turned my lantern in every direction, but there was no clear path in sight. I was breathing heavily, my body was shaking in absolute terror. Where were my parents? What was that noise? Was that really my mother screaming? Out of the darkness behind me, I heard heavy footsteps heading toward me. I froze. unable to move, and brace myself for the worst. A hand grasped my mouth as I almost let out a scream. A man stepped in front of me and put his finger to his lips, gesturing for me to stay quiet. It was my father. Thank God, I thought, as a feeling of relief washed over me. I wasn't alone anymore. That relief quickly vanished as my eyes met his. I'd never seen such terror in his eyes. As I brought my lantern closer, I noticed blood splattered across his entire being. My eyes mirrored his terror. I whispered, "Dad, what's going on? Where's Mom?" "Follow me slowly and quietly. We have to go now," he replied sternly, though his voice shook with fear. "Where's Mom?" I heard a scream. He cut me off, grabbing me by the shoulders. "Mom will be waiting at the van for us. Let's go." He grabbed my hand, and we attempted to make our way back. We walked slowly, as carefully as we could without snapping any twigs. As minutes turned into hours, it became very apparent, even with my father's guidance, that we were lost. A few yards behind us, we heard a series of branches snap as something barreled toward us at unnatural speeds. My father ripped the lantern from me and looked around frantically. We spotted the hollowed-out tree I had found earlier. He raced me over to it and shoved me into the child-sized gap in the trunk. In the blink of an eye, a black mass swallowed my father and the light in his hand. I covered my mouth with my hands, attempting to stay silent as he had told me. The teeth-grinding, chainsaw sound pierced my eardrums, and a thick, wet substance splattered across my face. The lantern fell to the ground in the middle of the violent attack. And then I saw it. My father, being torn to shreds. Flesh, blood, and bone were flung every which way. My eyes widened and my stomach sank as the light illuminated the black creature. It was tall, like a man, and covered in dark, greasy hair. Not like animal fur, but like a person who hadn't bathed or groomed in years. The hair hung off the creature, dripping with blood. Its claws, which were ripping through my father, were long and human-like, sharp as razors and bony like a skeleton. Its body was shaped like an ape's, but lankier and much larger. Its face, it didn't have one. It was just a skull, resembling a deer's but with the teeth of a predator. Protruding from the skin and hair around its neck, it looked as if a disease had been eating through the flesh of its face. It grasped my father high off his feet, tearing him to pieces in a matter of seconds. My loving father was nothing but a pile of gore scattered across the forest floor. Silence befell the woods once again as the creature huffed in exhaustion, yet carried a lingering energy. It didn't even eat the prey it had just shredded. It was hunting for sport. It was hunting for sport. The lantern began to flicker out as the creature turned its head toward me. My heart pounded against my chest. Tears streamed down my face, and my hands remained clamped over my mouth. I could see my life flash before my eyes. I was sure I was about to join my father in the mess on the ground. Everything went black. I must have passed out from the fear. I didn't expect to wake up. I awoke the next morning with a camp ranger carrying me in a blanket. As I fluttered my eyes open, hoping I had just had a horrible nightmare, the ranger's gaze met mine. He had an awful look of pity and despair. "Where are my parents?" I asked, already knowing the terrible answer. "Authorities are on their way, and we will get to the bottom of it then." Tears flooded my eyes as I recalled the night before. The police identified the attack as a bear mauling. I told them what I had seen over and over, but they looked at me like I was insane. They assumed my imagination had filled in the blanks of a bear attack in the dark. But I knew what happened. I knew what was out there. They found my mother's scattered remains about a mile into the woods. They must have known the attack was unnatural, but I don't blame them for not believing a 13-year-old talking about a beast with a skull for a face and razors for hands. I know I didn't imagine it. That was no bear. To this day, I will not go into the woods because I know that thing is still out there. I open my eyes, stretch, and yawn. God, I feel good. Pain-free for the first time in a long time. I move my limbs. They are not stiff or sore, which is surprising, but good. In fact, my foremost sensation is one of hunger, a deep, insatiable hunger. I feel as if I haven't eaten anything for an eternity. I last remember a Roman soldier holding a cloth dipped in wine on the tip of his spear to my parched mouth. Not to help me, the cunt, but to keep the agony alive longer. Ah, well, it is all in the past now. I rise. The stone floor feels cool beneath the soles of my feet. I look with interest at the jagged holes in my feet. I can see the gray stone through the holes. Bits of my bones poke through the red flesh, together with some dangling veins and nerves. I wonder what happened to the nails. I look at the holes in my hands, slowly turning them over, and touch my sharp, protruding broken bones. The overwhelming hunger clouds every other sensation and dulls the memories that had been flashing through my brain in a huge jumble. I walk to the entrance of the cavern. Alive. I was not a particularly strong or athletic man. Dead. I raise my holy hand and push the giant rock away from the cavern entrance as easily as brushing a dead leaf off. The two soldiers standing on guard scream like little children, as if they were the ones unarmed and dressed merely in a tattered shroud. Their arms do them no good, of course. I snatch their dull spears out of their hands. One drives his sword through me, the whites of his eyes flashing like a startled horse. I easily draw it out of my torso and toss it aside. Then I grasp him tight as he turns to flee and bring my mouth down, fastening my sharp teeth in his muscular shoulder, tearing off chunks of flesh. Nothing has ever tasted so delicious since the dawn of time. I have pinned the other one down beneath my foot, and I take my time with my two-man feast. Soon enough, it is all done, and there is nothing but a pile of bloody bones and Roman armor, and yet my hunger is barely satiated. It stings me almost as sharply as the moment I set foot out of the cavern. I chew thoughtfully on the last delicious bits of sinew, thinking about where to find more flesh. I consider the bustling port of Aole, but somehow I do not quite feel ready to face the crowds yet. And, of course, my idiots. I'll have to deal with them, but for now, I just want to take pleasure in moving and eating freely. I've always had a soft spot for the taste of fish and salt. I set off towards the Azure coast. I recently got my CDL license, and since then, I've been traveling all across the country seeing different states, cities, and small towns. For the most part, all of my loads and unloads have been smooth. I've driven through rough neighborhoods and even ghost towns, but nothing ever sent a chill down my spine like Hollow Creek, Vermont. The night I went was a random Friday. I had just finished delivering a load to a warehouse in Burlington when my boss called and asked me to pick up another load from Hollow Creek, about an hour away. I checked the time. It was getting close to midnight. Normally I would have complained, but I was off the next day, so I just shrugged it off, hopped in my truck, and started driving. On the way there, something already felt off. I'd never been asked to pick up a load that late before. As I got closer, a thick fog started rolling in. It was so dense that even my headlights felt useless, barely cutting through the gray. Still, I kept driving. Eventually, I passed a large sign on the side of the highway, "Welcome to Hollow Creek," and that's when things really started to feel wrong. I called my boss and asked exactly where I needed to go. He told me to head to a district called Rowan Ridge. As I drove deeper into Rowan Ridge, the city disappeared. There was nothing but miles of cornfields stretching out on both sides of the road. No houses, no lights, just darkness and crops swaying in the wind. Then I saw a warehouse sitting alone in the middle of all that land. No parking lot, no loading dock, nothing. I pulled up anyway. I stepped out of my truck, expecting someone to be waiting, but there was no one. The place was dead silent, so I walked over to a side door and knocked. No answer. That's when the uneasiness really set in. I was standing in the middle of nowhere, in a place I didn't know, surrounded by nothing but cornfields, and it was past midnight. I decided to call my boss and let him know no one was there, but when I walked back to my truck, the door was locked. My stomach dropped. My keys were inside, my phone was inside. I was stuck. I let out a frustrated sigh, then heard something rustle behind me. I immediately spun around, but there was nothing. All right, I muttered to myself. I'll just walk down the road. Find a house or a barn. Someone's got to have a phone. So I started walking. 10 minutes passed, or at least it felt like 10 minutes. It could have been longer. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. Every few steps, I turned around. Nothing. Then, in the distance, I saw a house with the porch light on. Relief hit me instantly. I started walking faster toward it, but as I did, that same fog rolled back in, thicker than before. Within seconds, I couldn't see anything. I kept moving in what I thought was the right direction, but suddenly, I wasn't on the road anymore. I was in the cornfield. Panic set in immediately. I tried to turn around, tried to find my way back, but no matter which direction I went, it felt like I was only getting deeper. That's when I saw it. A scarecrow. But something about it wasn't right. The sack on its head didn't look like cloth, it looked like leather. Its body, stuffed with hay, looked wrong. Like something was underneath it, something real or alive. I stood there, confused and scared. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I turned to see another scarecrow, then another, and another. My chest tightened as they were forming a circle around me. Slowly, they started walking closer. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. None of it made sense. And then the fear that had me frozen in place snapped. So, I ran. I ran faster than I ever have in my life, pushing through the corn, not caring where I was going, just trying to get away. Behind me, I heard them, running, keeping up with me. Their footsteps, if you could even call them that, were crashing through the field. I didn't dare look back at first, but when I did, I wish I hadn't. Their mouths were hanging open, their bodies moved wrong, and they were gaining on me. Tears streamed down my face. This isn't real, I kept telling myself. This can't be real, I screamed for help. Then something grabbed my shoulder. I was yanked to the ground before I could even react. They were all around me, closing in, reaching for me. I shut my eyes. I knew it was over. Then, bang. The sound was deafening. I covered my ears as another shot rang out. I opened my eyes. An older man stood there with a shotgun. He reached down, grabbed my arm, and pulled me to my feet with surprising strength. I looked around and realized something that didn't make sense, because we were right in front of the house. The same one I had seen earlier. I didn't question it. I just ran inside. He followed close behind, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Then he leaned his shotgun against it. He turned to me. "You, the trucker supposed to pick up the load?" he asked. I nodded, still shaking. He sighed and sat down. "I was supposed to help you load up," he said. "Told your boss to delay you until morning." Clearly he didn't listen. I didn't know what to say. I was still trying to understand what I had just gone through. The old man stood up and walked over to me. He looked me dead in the eyes. "The evil in those fields," he said quietly, "it preys on the living." He paused. "I've seen a lot of good men fall to it." Then his voice softened just a bit. "You're one of the lucky ones." I stayed in that house until sunrise. When morning came, he drove me back to my truck. We managed to get the door open, loaded up the cargo, and I left without looking back. And I can promise you this, I will never return to Hollow Creek. "When was the last time you saw your spouse?" Officer Zepra asked. "This morning," I replied, "right before I left for work." He looked down as he wrote something on his little notepad. "Did you speak with them at all after that?" He looked back up at me. I shook my head. "Is that normal?" "What do you mean?" I asked him to clarify. "Is it normal for your spouse to contact you while you're at work?" Officer Zepre rephrased the question. "Not really," I said. "They know how busy I am and only contact me if they have something important to say." He wrote in his notepad again. "Can you think of any reason why they might want to leave without telling you?" he asked. "If you're asking if there was a reason for them to leave me, the answer is no. I was offended by the implication. If anything, I'm the one who had a reason to leave, I thought. That person was insane. If they didn't have such a wealthy family who would ruin me if I tried to divorce them, I would have left years ago." "Well," Officer Zepper said, "I think I have all I need." He slid the notepad into his pocket before getting to his feet. "Do you mind if I take a look around before I leave?" He gestured toward the interior of the house. "See if I see anything out of the ordinary." Help yourself, I said. Before he started his search of the house, he pulled a necklace out of his shirt and clasped the medallion that hung from the end of it. What's that? I asked. This is Saint Rita of Cascia, he explained as he showed me the medallion. She is the patron saint of lost causes, especially those involving women. At least that's what my mother always told me. This used to be hers before she passed. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I kept my mouth shut. Do you mind if I look around on my own? He asked when he saw that I was prepared to follow him. This may sound silly, but I like to talk to Saint Rita, asking for her help and guidance, and I'm a little self-conscious about it. Yeah, go ahead, I gestured. But you won't find anything here. Eskar, I'm done, Officer Zephyr said 15 minutes later. Did Saint Rita offer any advice? I asked in jest. It doesn't work like that, he replied. But if she can help, she will, he said. She always does. After he left, I celebrated by cracking open a bottle of champagne and drinking while singing, Ding dong, the witch is dead. Ixi, I must have had a little too much to drink, because when I woke up, I was sprawled out on the couch. The first thing I noticed when I sat up was that I had an extremely full bladder. I pulled myself to my feet and staggered toward the bathroom. I had managed about a dozen steps before I suddenly tripped over something. When I looked to see what it was, I was shocked to see my spouse's severed forearm lying on the floor. What the fuck? I threw you in a storm drain on the edge of the city. Shh. Things got crazier from there. I hadn't noticed it at first, but there was a black Sharpie marker in my spouse's dismembered hand. As I stood there staring in shock, the hand began writing a message on the tiled floor. The rest of me will be along shortly, the message said. An unexpected snowstorm is what trapped me and hundreds of others on the highway near the pass of Oakhaven. The storm brought traffic to a complete standstill, preventing any of us from getting home. Frustrated, but keeping my cool, I turned the heat to high and glanced at the fuel gauge. Well over half a tank. It should keep me going until the standstill yields and we move again, or at the very least, until the storm passes. I glanced out my passenger window into the car next to me and saw a worried-looking woman cradling what looked like a 2-year-old, or thereabouts. I wondered how much fuel they had left and how long they could keep the heat on. I let the thought simmer before turning my attention to my phone. I sent my wife a message. Stuck in the storm, gonna be late, love you. Before switching to social media to see if there were any updates on the traffic jam, or maybe if emergency services were getting involved. I only managed to see a few posts about others being stuck before my phone lost service, greeting me with an error message and a loading screen. Throwing my phone onto the seat next to me, I stared ahead, trying to pass the time. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to darkness. Not complete darkness, though. Car headlights lit the way, although with the way the snow was coming down, it did little more than create a wall of blindness. It was nauseating to look at. I grabbed my phone. 11:50 p.m. stared back at me. Oh fuck, I muttered. I'd been stuck here for almost 14 hours. The service still showed 0 bars. I looked toward the car from before, but I couldn't see into it. Condensation filled the glass. Looking at my fuel gauge, my stomach dropped. 1/4 of a tank left. I quickly turned my engine off, conserving the fuel I had left. The bitter cold instantly filled the cab, a harsh contrast to what I had become accustomed to. Looking around proved useless. Nothing here could keep me warmer. I did, however, have an emergency supply backpack in the trunk, but I thought I'd keep that as a last resort. For now, I gritted my teeth and endured. Another 8 hours passed. The sun rose. The storm worsened. Trying to sleep away the need to eat and relieve myself, I was awoken by footsteps crunching in the snow. Looking in my side mirrors, I saw nothing. They were completely covered. However, I could make out a figure moving past the glass before the sound grew distant. There was nothing for a while but the pattering of snow hitting the vehicles. Then, car horns, followed by a sharp yell from a man. It sounded like it was only a few cars ahead, though I imagined the wind had carried the sound. The snow had now completely covered the windows, turning the inside into darkness. If I didn't have my phone, I wouldn't be able to tell what time of day it was. It also acted as a heat sponge, sucking what little warmth remained from the cab. I had no choice. I turned the car back on, hoping to warm up and melt some of the snow. It pushed my tank into the red, but I could finally see out of my windows again. I took the time to look around. I could only make out a handful of cars like mine engines on, windows clear. Inside them, faces were fixed with despair. The rest of the cars were nothing short of ice blocks. The car carrying the young mother and her child was the same. Both were now encased in an icy tomb. Horrifying images crossed my mind, imagining how they chose to spend their final moments. A tear rolled down my cheek. My own mortality was now in question. I sat back in my seat and let my mind wander. I was pulled back when my engine began to splutter, lights flickering. Then, nothing. I gritted my teeth. I made the only choice I had left. I opened the door. The icy wind greeted me with ferocity. I went to the trunk, grabbed my backpack, and started forward, head bowed slightly as I passed her car. A sign of respect, I told myself. I continued forward. It felt like miles. Every step revealed something worse. Cars were flipped onto their sides, drivers nowhere to be seen. Others had their roofs peeled clean back, interiors filled with snow. Then I saw the first one, skin blistered. Blue. Eye sockets empty, mouth open, tongue missing. The entire face was frozen in a scream. I kept walking, stopping periodically to open my pack and eat the MRE inside. Another hour passed. More bodies, all positioned the same, all missing the same pieces. The wind died down. It was replaced by something else. A chiming sound. Distant screams. Rapid movement somewhere in the white. I kept moving. Hours passed. My fingertips began to turn black. Frostbite was creeping in. My determination never faltered. My mind was set on dying while trying to find a way out. All of that. Gone. When I saw it. The familiar number plate. My car. And next to it, the woman's car. Her door was now open. My new neighbor was gorgeous. Classic good looks with long blonde hair, blue eyes, and a dimple on one cheek. I envied whoever was her boyfriend. One day, I saw her standing by the fence. I said hello and walked over. "Could you help me with something?" she asked. "Of course. What is it?" "My shower drain is clogged." "Sure. Let me get my tools and I'll be right there." I went and got my tool, which was a bent wire coat hanger, then brushed my teeth and combed my hair. I went to her back door. She was waiting for me. But now she was wearing a full-length silk robe, black, with something like Celtic symbols in gold. She took me to her bedroom and showed me the ensuite bathroom. "It's in there," she said apologetically. I snagged the clump of hair with my tool, turned around, and triumphantly showed her the disgusting clump. She smiled and said, "Oh, thank you." Then the sleeve of her silk robe slipped off her shoulder. She said sweetly, "Oops." Her robe slid further, and she stared at me with her brilliant smile. The next thing I knew, we were both having the time of our lives. Her skin was incredibly soft and smooth. Her lips were full and eager, and together we did anything and everything we could imagine. After 4 hours, we were spent. She thanked me again for removing the clog and said, "Good night," as she closed the back door. I couldn't believe it. This kind of thing didn't happen to average-looking guys like me. I assumed it was a once-in-a-lifetime adventure. That's not how things went. Every week she invited me over, and it was grand. I kept looking for signs of a boyfriend who was, say, working on an oil platform for 6 months at a time, or maybe somebody on deployment. Not for a second did I believe that it was because I was the most attractive man she had ever seen. I started having trouble in my life. I was written up at work for making stupid mistakes. I didn't care. I was happy all the time, not just the one day a week I could see her. She had improved my life immeasurably. My sister visited a few months later because I stopped responding to her texts. She had a very serious expression when I opened the door. I'm worried about you, she said simply. Have you been to the doctor lately? She insisted on driving me to the doctor a few weeks later. I thought it would ease her mind when I told her that the doctor gave me a clean bill of health. But the more I thought about the whole scenario, the more I wanted another opinion. Maybe the doctor would have an answer to what was going on. When he walked into the exam room, the doctor did a quick check of the file on the screen. He asked, "How old are you?" "I'm 24. Why?" He hesitated, then said, "I would assume you were in your 50s by your appearance. When did your hair turn gray?" "I don't know." Then the truth tumbled out of me. "You see, I've had this gorgeous woman in my life for the last 6 months, and she can't get enough of me. It's incredible. She is drop-dead gorgeous." "Why does she want to be with me?" the doctor asked. "Could I please see your driver's license?" I showed him and he said, "Ah, I see." The doctor sighed and said, "I have seen something like this before, but I hesitate to bring it up. Tell me, I have to know." The doctor sat down. "Tell me, I have to know." The doctor sat down. "This will sound bizarre, but I think you have an attachment." "Like a parasite?" "Sort of. I think your new friend is a succubus. She gets her energy from men, not from food." "Have you ever seen her eat?" I thought for a moment. Surprisingly, I hadn't. She will drain you over and over until it kills you. "I know. It sounds too strange to be real, but look at your driver's license photo. Take a hard look at it." I saw that I really had aged in the last 6 months. Why didn't I see this before? My cousin went through this. He was very happy up until the day he died, 9 months after he started dating his dream girl. We've all done crazy things for love, but this isn't about love. It's about her needing your life energy. You have it, she needs it, and you're giving it to her. She will kill you. I told my sister I was slightly anemic and would be taking iron supplements. She was relieved. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the doctor was right. I had a succubus. I had to talk to my girl about it. 1 month later, we moved to Savannah to see a witch she knew. I wanted to be turned into an incubus. I could feed off other women, then bring it home to share with her. It wasn't a great plan, but it was all we had. After an excruciating ritual, 3 days buried in dirt, several prayers, and a sacrifice, I became an incubus. I looked like I was 20 years old again. I had incredible energy until I suddenly dropped. As long as I could feed in time, I could make it back to my girl and feed her. She was happy, I was happy, all was well. Still, I had this nagging feeling. It was too good to be true, and I never did ask about what this lifestyle did to my soul. But when I looked at my beautiful girl, as long as we were together, what could go wrong? Maybe wrong was me turning into an incubus, but what could I do? I am never going back. Mara turned to Aiden. She wasn't tired. Vampires don't get tired, but she was bored and wanted to leave. Aiden, however, was entranced and showed no sign of becoming restless, which was surprising because usually he was the one ready to bolt, get the hell out of wherever they were, and seek safety in their sanctuaries. Now, however, he was looking up at old Valerius, spewing his usual mumbo-jumbo, his eyes shining. It was the same with Tam, darling old Tam, standing next to Aiden. His lips were moving slowly, trying to follow Valerius's speech. Mara sighed. Aiden was her true and only companion, and Tam was her cousin. She and Tam had been turned together, actually, and she loved them both dearly, but the obsession with Valerius was becoming a bit much. She had no desire to go hunting in the catacombs guarded by Roman spears and swords. It wasn't their fault. Valerius remained old and ugly no matter what he drank, and drinking the blood of a crucified criminal, even if not quite dead, was a bit much anyway. Aiden, she plucked at his sleeve. Aiden couldn't hear her over Valerius's lunatic ravings, sipping immortal blood, closer to the godhead. The gray, stretchy skin over his bald head moved in sync with his words, and she felt herself overcome by loathing and disgust. She hated him so much. And now he was putting their whole clan in danger. "Let's go." Her cry happened to time with a pause from Valerius, and it rang through the basilica. Everyone turned their heads to look at her, while Valerius's beady steel eyes seemed to stab through her. The look on his face was the exact same as when he had hunted her down before turning her, not so long ago. She had a flashback, Tam screaming, blood spurting. Although she enjoyed her life these days, she had never forgiven Valerius. Aiden said, "Shh," loudly, willing everyone to turn away from them, but Valerius raised a skinny arm. "Does Magdalene have something to say?" "You wish to speak, child?" One of the babies, stretched and hanging on a rope next to Valerius, twitched. Mara hoped that it was just a death twitch, that the baby was dead. Valerius couldn't shake the belief that babies would make him look young again, despite all evidence to the contrary. Mara was not skilled in public speaking. She groped for words. The catacombs are dangerous. His followers, mad. I heard one speak last night. They're sure he's alive. Wrong words. Valerius was visibly aroused. "Thank you, child, thank you," he exclaimed, almost dancing with delight and enthusiasm. "My friends, my family, you will accompany me on this glorious mission. A mortal who raises mortals from the dead, who is not dead himself, despite the most cruel crucifixion. Elevate our species." His voice rose higher, almost a shriek. The baby twitched again, and Mara heard a very faint cry, piercing through Valerius's ravings. She brought her lips to Aiden's ear. "Let's take the baby and leave." She didn't even know if she was merely expressing a fantasy, or if she really wanted to do something so impossible. Aiden's eyes widened in surprise. He gripped Mara's hand. "Are you crazy?" Her whisper hadn't been low enough. Tam had heard her too. Without looking at her, he cried out, "Valerius, she wants to take that baby." Another silence fell, and Mara felt a slight spinning. Valerius was looking at her again. Mara stuttered. "No." The basilica seemed to shift. Aiden disentangled her fingers from his, taking an imperceptible step away. Mara said louder, "No." Fear was gathering in her heart. Valerius said softly, a sacrifice for the success of our mission." His voice rose on the last words, becoming a command. The crowd swayed toward Mara. The baby cried again, but now Mara, glimpsing through them, couldn't see it hanging from the rope anymore, just the very still ones. Tam grabbed her arm. "You sniveling bitch, nothing but whinge and whine." Mara heard him snarling under his breath. "Tam, please, Aiden." She shrieked in terror, twisting her head looking for Aiden, who seemed to have melted into the crowd of faces streaked with bloodlust. "A sacrifice," screamed Valerius, and the crowd repeated, chant-like, "sacrifice," pushing Mara towards the front. Mara stumbled, the multiple sharp, strong hands pushing and pulling her. Her limbs, her hair falling out of her headdress. Then she heard the baby cry again, very clearly, very close to her. She looked up, pushing her hair out of her face. Someone she didn't recognize was holding the baby to her. The crowd seemed to blur in the background, their chant becoming almost a hum. "Take the baby and leave, Magdalene." Obviously, the stranger holding the baby was talking to her, a crystal clear but also a very normal human voice. For an instant, Tam's face swam into clear sight, and behind him, Valerius, their faces twisted into savage bloodlust, reaching out for her. Galvanized into action, Mara snatched the baby. A path cleared for her, the stranger holding his arms wide to keep the crowd off Mara. The baby smelled of warm milk and sweet human flesh. Holding it tight, Mara flew through the path. She could hear Valerius' shrieking behind her, and for a split second, she glimpsed Aiden calling her name, his pet name for her, begging her to stay. She didn't stop, racing into the black night. The heat and smells and noises melted away. She was alone with the baby by the cliffs, the only sound that of gentle, crashing waves.